The space station smelled of rust and old smoke. Metal walls groaned when large ships docked, and traders shouted over one another in the narrow halls. It was not a place for heroes, not a place for rich explorers. It was a place for men who had nothing left. Captain Elias had nothing left. His ship was old and broken, his fuel almost gone, and his pockets held only a few credits. He should have spent them on food, or maybe on fuel for his dying engine. But his eyes found something strange, something that made him stop breathing for a moment. In the back corner of the market, hidden behind cages of broken machines, stood a glass container. Inside was a woman, frozen in thick blue ice. Her hair floated like silk inside the frozen prison. Her skin pale as moonlight. Around her neck was a metal tag, written in a language Elias could not read. Traders laughed when they saw him staring. "She is useless," one said. "An old experiment. Maybe a relic of some war. She is dead weight. No value." Another spat on the ground. "No one wants her, not even for scrap." But Elias kept staring. Her face looked peaceful, but something in her expression carried pain. It was not the face of a monster, not the face of a weapon, but the face of someone lost. He looked down at his last credits. He thought of food, thought of fuel, thought of survival. But something inside whispered, "If you walk away, you will regret this forever." He asked the trader, "How much for her?" The trader laughed so hard his fat belly shook. "For her? You want her? Fine. Give me your last credits. Buy some clothes for her. Cover her when she wakes. If she even wakes." Elias did not argue. He gave up everything, and in exchange he carried the frozen woman aboard his ship. His ship was called the Lantern, though it carried little light. Its walls were scratched, its engines coughed, and its beds smelled of dust. But now, in the center of the cargo bay, stood the glass container with the frozen woman inside. Elias placed the clothes he bought beside it, a simple robe of soft fabric. He sat in silence, watching her face through the ice. Loneliness had been his only friend for years. Now, even in silence, he felt he was not alone. But fear crawled in his chest. Why had she been frozen? Who had left her to rot in a market? And, most of all, what would she be when she woke? Hours passed, and the ship drifted away from the station. Stars shone like cold fire outside the window. Elias pressed a hand to the glass, and the frozen shell around the woman began to crack. He jumped back, heart racing, as lines spread across the ice like lightning. The glass container hissed, steam filling the cargo bay. The ice broke away piece by piece, falling like blue shards onto the floor. At last, the woman fell forward, landing in his arms, her body weak and trembling. Her skin was ice cold, but her chest moved. Breathing shallow gasps, she was alive. Elias wrapped her in the robe, his hands shaking. Her eyes flickered open, not human eyes, but bright silver, glowing faintly in the dim light. For a moment she looked at him with terror, then confusion, then silence. She whispered something in a language he did not understand. Her voice was soft, but it carried weight, like the echo of forgotten stars. He tried to speak gently. "You are safe." "I am not your enemy," she blinked, watching him carefully, as if measuring his soul. Then her body weakened again, and she closed her eyes, falling into deep sleep. Elias sat beside her, unsure if he had saved her or doomed them both. Already, shadows of doubt circled his mind. The traders had mocked her, called her useless, but he had seen the way her eyes glowed, the way the air itself seemed to hold its breath when she moved. There was power inside her, a secret locked in flesh and ice. Outside the ship, far in the dark, a signal pulsed. Unknown ships had noticed the frozen woman was gone. They followed the trail, silent hunters in the void. Elias did not know it yet, but danger was already awake. His choice to spend his last credits would change more than his life. It would change the fate of stars. And so, the man with nothing and the woman from the ice began their story together, not as enemies, not yet as friends, but as two lost souls bound by a strange decision. The lantern drifted into the black sea of space, carrying them both toward mystery, danger, and a truth that would not stay frozen forever. Asterisk, the lantern drifted through the emptiness of space, its engines weak and tired. Inside the ship, the frozen woman now lay wrapped in soft clothes. Breathing slowly, Captain Elias sat near her, afraid to sleep, afraid she might vanish if he looked away. He had bought her with his last credits, but he did not yet know if he had saved her life or stolen his own future. Hours passed before she stirred again. Her silver eyes opened, glowing faintly like cold stars trapped in a human face. She tried to rise, but her body trembled. Weak from years of frozen silence, Elias rushed to steady her, his hands gentle, his heart unsure. "You are safe," he said softly, though he knew she could not understand his words. She looked at him with fear first, then curiosity, tilting her head like a lost child. Her lips moved, speaking sounds strange and sharp, a language that carried echoes of distant worlds. Elias shook his head, helpless, and she fell silent again. She touched her robe, the one he had bought, her fingers tracing the cloth as though it meant something sacred. Then she pressed her palm to the metal floor of the ship. Closing her eyes, the lights flickered. The air grew heavy, and Elias felt a strange pulse through the walls. It was as if the ship itself had felt her touch. Elias stepped back, his breath caught in his throat. The woman opened her eyes again, whispering words he could not follow, but her voice carried power. Not like a cry for help, but like a command. He realized she was not simply lost, she was dangerous. Before he could speak, the radar beeped. A shadow moved across the screen, a ship following them, its signal sharp and deliberate. Elias cursed under his breath, slamming his fist against the console. He had left the market only hours ago, yet already someone was hunting them. The woman noticed his fear, her silver eyes narrowing. She rose unsteady to her feet, still weak but determined. Elias tried to guide her back to the bed, but she shook her head. With slow steps, she walked to the wall, her hand tracing a shape with her finger. Lines appeared where she touched, glowing faint blue against the metal. A map, Elias realized, wide and complex, stretching across systems he had never seen. She drew with certainty, as if the stars themselves lived inside her memory. Then she pointed at one glowing mark, staring into his eyes. "You want me to go there?" Elias asked, his voice unsure. She did not answer in words, but her gaze was steady. Her finger pressed the star once more. Then her hand dropped, her strength failing. Elias caught her again. Lowering her gently back to the bed, he sat for a long moment in silence, staring at the glowing lines on the wall. Why did she carry maps of forgotten stars inside her mind? Why had she been frozen for so long, left to rot in a market? And why? Was another ship already chasing them through the void? He knew one truth only he could not turn back now. If he abandoned her, she would die. If he kept her, he might die himself. But something inside him whispered that fate had already chosen. The beeping of the radar grew faster. The hunter ship was closing in, moving like a predator through dark waters. Elias prepared his old vessel for escape, his hands quick though his heart trembled. The lantern was not strong, but it was clever, built to run when it could not fight. The frozen woman, still weak, opened her eyes and watched him. She reached for his arm, her touch cold but steady. She spoke again, slow and deliberate, repeating the same sound until he understood. It was not her name, not a place, but a warning, danger. Elias felt the weight of her voice, even in a language he did not know. He understood her fear. He nodded once, gripping the controls tighter. If the hunters wanted her, they would have to tear her from his ship. Engines roared, lights flickered, and the lantern leapt forward. The stars blurred into streaks of silver as the ship raced through the dark. Behind them, the hunter followed, silent but relentless, and all the while, the glowing star map on the wall pulsed like a heartbeat. Elias stole one last glance at the alien woman resting weakly. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, there was no fear, only trust. He wondered why she trusted him. A poor man with nothing. But in her gaze, he saw something strange hope. The chase had begun, and with it the mystery deepened. Who was she? This frozen woman who carried maps of forgotten stars? Why did hunters track her through the void? And what secret waited at the mark she had shown him? The lantern flew into the shadows, carrying a human with nothing and an alien with everything. Together, they were bound by fear, by danger, and by a choice that could not be undone. And in the dark behind them, the hunter closed the distance, its eyes fixed on the prize. The lantern shook as its engine strained. The old ship was never built for long chases, but now it had no choice. Behind it, a hunter ship glided through space like a shadow, silent and merciless. Captain Elias gritted his teeth, pushing every bit of power into the thrusters. The frozen woman lay weak on the bed, her silver eyes half closed. Yet even in her weakness, she seemed aware of the danger. Her fingers clutched the robe he had bought for her, and her gaze never left the radar screen. Every time the hunter drew closer, her breath grew shallow. As if she could feel its presence, Elias cursed under his breath. He had outrun smugglers, pirates, even patrol ships in his younger years. But this was different. The hunter moved with patience, as though it already knew the end of the chase. He checked the cargo bay wall, where her glowing map still pulsed. One star burned brighter than the others, the one she had pointed to. It was far, deep in uncharted space. Reaching it would mean burning through what little fuel the lantern still had. "Is that where you want me to go?" Elias whispered. The woman opened her eyes, weak but steady. She gave the smallest nod, and Elias knew there was no turning back. He turned the ship toward the glowing star. The hunter followed, silent, waiting. Every second stretched like a lifetime, filled with the sound of engines coughing and alarms warning of heat. The lantern was not built for glory, only survival, but even survival seemed thin tonight. The woman spoke suddenly, her words sharp and strange. Elias shook his head. Unable to understand, she grew frustrated, her hand trembling as she pointed at the ship's control panel. Her finger tapped 3 switches, fast and precise. Elias hesitated, then obeyed. The ship lurched, systems rerouting, lights flickering. Suddenly, the lantern's engines roared louder, stronger than before. She had unlocked something hidden in his own vessel, a secret he had never known. Elias turned to her, shocked. "How did you?" He began, but the words died in his throat. Her silver eyes gleamed, and for the first time he saw a spark of strength inside them. She was not only surviving, she was fighting. The lantern leapt forward, stretching the distance between them and the hunter. But Elias knew it was only borrowed time. Fuel burned too quickly. Systems overheated, and the hunter was still behind them. The chase was far from over. He guided the ship through an asteroid belt, sharp rocks spinning in the void. The lantern twisted between them, scraping metal, sparks flying. The hunter followed with deadly grace, never striking the stones, never losing speed. It was like being chased by a ghost, one that never tired. The woman pressed her hand against the wall again, her body shaking. More blue lines spread across the metal. New maps, new paths. She was guiding him, leading them through space like a living compass. Elias followed her directions, trusting her even when reason screamed not to. Hours passed, each moment filled with tension. They had no food left, little water, and the ship's alarms rang with warning after warning. Yet the woman never stopped, her weak body leaning on the wall as she traced paths of light. Her determination was stronger than her strength. At last, Elias collapsed into the pilot's seat, sweat dripping down his face. He looked at her and spoke with tired honesty. "Why are they chasing you? Who are you?" But she gave no answer, only silence. Her eyes softened, though, as if she carried sorrow deeper than words. She reached out, placing her cold hand on his arm. For a moment, Elias felt her pain, not through words, but through presence. It was the weight of exile, of betrayal, of a past that hunted her even in sleep. The radar beeped again, sharp and merciless. The hunter had closed the gap. Closer now than ever, Elias cursed, slamming his hand on the console. "We can't outrun them forever," he whispered. The woman's silver eyes flashed. She stood with effort, walking unsteady toward the cargo hatch. Elias tried to stop her. "No, stay down. You're too weak." But she shook her head, whispering a single word he could not mistake. "Fight." Elias froze. She reached for the hatch controls, her hands glowing faintly with the same light as her star maps. The doors opened, and for a moment, silence filled the bay. Then the woman lifted her hands, and the very air seemed to shift. Outside, the hunter ship slowed, its systems flickering. For the first time, it stumbled, caught in some invisible snare. The woman's voice rose, low and powerful. Chanting in her forgotten tongue, Elias watched in awe and terror as the enemy ship trembled under her will. Then she collapsed, falling into his arms. Unconscious once again, the hunter ship recovered, engines roaring louder, angrier than before. Elias knew she had bought them a moment, nothing more, but that moment was enough. He forced the lantern forward, driving it toward the glowing star she had marked. The chase continued, but now Elias understood. This was not just about survival. The woman carried power, knowledge, and enemies older than his own life. And somehow, by spending his last credits, he had tied his fate to hers. The hunter still followed, silent and deadly. But Elias no longer felt only fear. Now, he felt something else burning in his chest. The beginning of defiance. The spark of human stubbornness. The hunt had begun, and neither man nor shadow could stop what was coming. The lantern drifted in silence after the chase, its engines weak and tired. Elias sat at the controls, his eyes heavy, his mind full of questions. The frozen woman lay in the bed once more, pale and still, her silver eyes closed. She had saved them with her strange power, but it had drained her completely. The hunter ship had pulled back for now. It lingered in the distance like a dark shadow, watching, waiting. Elias knew it was not gone, only patient. Predators did not leave their prey, not until the end. He stared at the glowing map on the wall. The star she had drawn still burned with faint blue light. The brightest mark pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat calling them forward. It was her destination, but it was not his, not yet. Elias wanted answers. He wanted to know who she was, why she carried such maps, and why a powerful hunter ship followed them across the void. But all he had were questions, no answers. When she woke again, her strength had returned a little. Her silver eyes opened, and for the first time, she tried to speak slowly. Her voice broke the silence, heavy with effort. She said a word that Elias could almost understand. "War." Elias frowned. "War? You mean the hunters? Pirates?" She shook her head, her lips pressing the word again, clearer. "Old war." Her hand trembled as she pointed to the map on the wall. Her fingers slid across glowing lines, touching star after star. Images filled Elias's mind, not from words, but from her eyes. He saw burning planets, fleets of ships clashing in fire. He saw cities torn apart by weapons too powerful to be real. And he saw her people, tall, silver-eyed beings, falling into the cold of space. Elias gasped, pulling back. "What are you showing me?" He whispered. Her eyes softened with sorrow, her hand falling to her chest. She spoke again, halting and broken. "My people." Betrayed. He understood only pieces, but it was enough. Her kind had once fought in a war so old that humans had no record of it. They had been betrayed by someone close, frozen as punishment. She was not the only one. Others still slept, hidden somewhere in the stars. Elias felt his stomach twist. If the hunters chased her, it meant the war was not truly forgotten. It meant someone feared her awakening. someone powerful enough to keep watching across centuries. And now, by saving her, Elias had stepped into that ancient fire. He looked at her, his voice rough. Why me? Why my ship? Her silver eyes met his, and she whispered one word. Choice. It struck him deeply, simple but heavy. He had chosen to spend his last credits, and that choice had changed everything. Outside the window, the hunter moved closer again. Elias gritted his teeth, pushing the controls. The lantern trembled as it jumped into another route, but the hunter followed, its shadow never leaving. The woman sat upright, her robe slipping from her shoulder. She touched her chest, her hand glowing faintly blue. Elias saw scars etched into her skin, strange patterns that looked like symbols. They shimmered as if alive, telling stories without words. She pointed to the scars, then to the map. Her voice cracked but steady. Weapon, Elias froze. You? You are the weapon? Her eyes lowered in shame, but she did not deny it. He felt fear crawl in his chest. The woman he had saved, the one he had given clothes and safety, she carried destruction inside her. Destruction from a war that had nearly ended worlds. And yet, when she looked at him, he did not see a monster, only sorrow. The hunter ship fired a warning shot, beams of light slicing near the lantern. Elias cursed, swerving hard. Alarmed screaming, the woman stood weakly, bracing herself against the wall. Her eyes glowed brighter, silver burning like stars. Elias shouted, No, don't. You'll kill yourself. But she ignored him, her hand pressing to the wall. The ship's system surged again, energy flooding through circuits that had been dead for years. The lantern leapt forward faster than ever before, escaping the hunter's strike. Elias stared at her in awe and fear. She was keeping them alive, but each use of her power pulled more strength from her body. If she kept this up, she would not survive. And yet she smiled faintly, as if sacrifice meant nothing. Why help me? Elias asked, desperate. Her voice was soft but clear this time. Because you. Help me. Simple words, heavy truth in her ancient war. Betrayal had ended her people, but Elias had chosen differently. The hunter ship faded into the distance again. For now, the lantern drifted forward. Guided by her glowing maps, Elias sat in silence, his mind burning with the weight of what he had learned. He was no longer just a poor captain with nothing. He carried a survivor of a forgotten war, a woman who was both victim and weapon. He carried her hope, her sorrow, and the danger that followed her. And as the stars stretched before them, Elias knew there was no turning back. The war she spoke of was not dead, only sleeping, and now it was waking. The lantern floated through empty space, its engines running on borrowed strength. Elias sat at the controls, his eyes fixed on the radar. The hunter ship had vanished for now, but he knew it was never far. Predators did not quit. They circled. They waited. Behind him, the alien woman sat quietly, wrapped in the robe he had bought. Her silver eyes glowed faintly in the dark, reflecting the lights of the console. She was weak but calm, her breathing steady. Yet Elias could not rest. His heart carried questions heavier than any cargo. He remembered her words weapon. He remembered the visions she had shown him burning planets. Betrayal, endless war. She carried destruction in her very blood. But when she looked at him, he saw not power, but sorrow still. Doubt whispered inside him. What if she was not only a survivor, but also a danger? What if by helping her, he had doomed himself and every human colony within reach? He clenched his fists, pushing the thoughts away. But they always returned. The woman rose slowly, her steps unsteady. She moved to the wall, touching the glowing map once more. Her fingers traced a new line, leading them through darker regions of space. She whispered a word Elias understood without translation. Safe. Elias narrowed his eyes. Safe for you, maybe. But what about me? She looked at him, puzzled, not understanding. He sighed, rubbing his face. Guilt gnawing at him. He wanted to trust her. But trust was not easy when shadows followed them both. The journey dragged on, silence thick inside the ship. Food was nearly gone, water running low. Elias shared what little he had, offering her the larger portion. She accepted with quiet grace, her silver eyes watching him with something close to gratitude. One night, alarm screamed. The lantern shuddered as another ship locked onto them. But this time, it was not the hunter, it was smaller. A smuggler vessel. Elias cursed, gripping the controls as the radio crackled alive. Human ship, cut your engines. The smuggler's voice hissed. We know what you carry. Hand over the woman and live. Elias felt his chest tighten, his eyes flicking toward her. She stood still, her eyes burning, as if she already knew betrayal would come. Elias spoke into the radio, voice steady but cold. Not happening. Laughter filled the speakers, sharp and cruel. Then die with her, the smuggler sneered. Weapons powering up, the lantern shook under the first strike. Metal groaning, alarms wailing, Elias slammed his hand on the controls. Spinning the ship hard, the woman stepped forward, placing her hand on his arm. Her voice was soft but firm. Trust me. Elias hesitated, fear twisting in his gut. He wanted to say no, wanted to lock her away, but her eyes held him still. She moved to the front of the ship, pressing her hand to the glass. Her silver eyes glowed brighter, her body trembling with effort. Outside, the stars bent strangely, light curving in ways Elias had never seen. The smuggler's weapons fired, but the blasts bent away. Sliding into the void, Elias gasped, staring. She had shielded them with power he could not understand, but her body shook violently, blood trickling from her nose. Elias rushed forward, catching her before she collapsed. The smuggler's ship roared closer, confused but furious. Elias growled under his breath, flipping switches. He turned the lantern on its side, pushing it into a narrow asteroid field. Rocks spun around them, smashing against the smuggler's ship behind. The woman opened her eyes weakly, whispering one word, "Go." Elias obeyed, forcing the ship forward, weaving through stone and shadow. The smuggler tried to follow, but its hull scraped, metal tearing at last. A giant rock split its ship apart, fire blooming in silence. The lantern shot free of the asteroid field. Bruised but alive, Elias collapsed back in his chair, his chest heaving. The woman lay across the seat beside him. Her silver eyes closed once more. He brushed hair from her face, whispering, "You saved me?" Again, but the doubt did not fade. Every time she used her power, she risked death. Every time she risked death. Elias felt his own chest twist with fear. And yet, could he truly trust a being whose blood carried the power of weapons? He sat in silence, staring at her fragile form. She had trusted him first, weak and alone. She had followed his voice, worn the clothes he gave, eaten the food he shared. Now it was his turn to decide. Would he see her as a weapon, like the hunters, the smugglers, and whoever betrayed her long ago? Or would he see her as something else, someone worth saving, no matter the risk? The choice pressed against his chest like a blade. Trust was not easy, but it was the only path forward. Elias reached out, taking her cold hand gently. His voice broke the silence, quiet but firm. "I will trust you," he whispered, "even if it kills me." Her silver eyes flickered open, a faint smile on her lips, and in that moment, Elias felt something shift. The danger was still out there. The hunter still followed. But between them, trust had been born, fragile but real. It was the one thing their enemies could never predict. The lantern drifted quietly after the battle, its hull scarred from the smuggler's attack. Inside, the air was thick with silence, broken only by the soft hum of the old engines. Elias sat at the controls, his hands trembling from exhaustion. Beside him, the alien woman slept, her face pale, her body weak from using her power. Trust had grown between them, but trust was not enough. Elias knew at the moment. He looked at the glowing map again. The star she had pointed to pulsed brighter now, as if calling them closer. He felt the weight of it pressing against his chest, a destination filled with secrets. When she woke, her silver eyes were softer. Calmer, she sat up slowly, whispering words he still could not fully understand. But then she pointed at the star on the wall again, her fingers steady. "Home," she said, her voice clear enough for him to grasp. Elias frowned, leaning forward. "Home? You mean your people are there?" She nodded, her eyes shining with faint light. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. If her people were still there, frozen like she once was, then he was flying toward an army of weapons. The thought chilled him. Humans had only just begun to stretch across the stars, building fragile colonies. They were not ready for a war against beings who could bend space and twist weapons aside with a glance. If she woke her people, it could mean the end of humanity. He turned to her, his voice low. "If I take you there, what happens to us?" "To my people?" Her silver eyes softened with sorrow. She whispered slowly, "Choice. Yours." The word struck him like a blade, simple but sharp. He leaned back in his chair, his mind a storm. His entire life had been survival, fighting for fuel, for food, for one more day. Now, for the first time, he held something greater than survival, a choice that could shape more than his own fate. Hours later, a distress signal flashed on the radar. A small cargo vessel drifting nearby, its hull torn open. Elias hesitated, every instinct screaming not to stop, but the woman touched his arm. Her eyes pleading, against reason, he brought the lantern close. They found survivors, 2 humans, weak and starving. Elias gave them water, shared what little food remained. But when the woman appeared, the survivors froze in terror. "That's her," one whispered, their eyes wide. The weapon, the ghost from old stories. Elias's blood ran cold. Even humans knew her legend, stories passed down like warnings. The survivors' hands shook as they begged, "Captain, don't protect her. She will destroy us all." Elias looked at the woman, then at the survivors. The fear in their eyes was real, sharp and cutting. For a moment, doubt returned. Was he saving a friend or carrying death itself? But the woman lowered her head, silent, as if the words had cut her deeper than any blade. When the survivors were dropped off at a nearby outpost, Elias did not speak. The silence between him and the woman was heavy, filled with unspoken pain. She had seen humans fear her before. He realized it was the story of her life, and now it was his burden too. Later, she stood by the window, staring at the stars. Her silver eyes reflected light like liquid metal. Softly she whispered, "If you fear, leave me." Elias's heart tightened. He stepped forward, his voice rough. "I should fear you. Maybe I do." She turned, her face unreadable. "But I made a choice the day I spent my last credits on you," Elias said firmly, "and I won't undo it now." Her eyes widened, silver light trembling. It was the first time she looked at him not with sorrow, but with hope, trust, fragile but growing, bound them together once more. And yet the danger had not vanished. On the radar, the hunter ship returned, closer than ever. This time it was not alone. 2 more dark vessels followed beside it. Elias's chest tightened, sweat dripping down his face. The hunters were no longer patient. They were ready to strike. The woman's silver eyes flared, brighter than before. She whispered a word Elias had never heard, but he felt its meaning. War is near. He gripped the controls, his voice steady though his hands shook. "Then we fight. Together." The lantern roared forward, heading toward the star she had marked. Behind them, the hunters gave chase, engines burning, weapons ready. Elias knew the next battle would not be a small skirmish. It would be a storm that could end them both. But the choice had been made. He would not betray her, not abandon her, not turn away. For the first time, Elias felt something stronger than fear guiding him. Not survival, not greed, but the human will to stand. The human choice had been made, and the stars themselves seemed to wait for what would come next. The lantern raced through the void, its engines screaming as they burned their last reserves. Elias gripped the controls with white knuckles, his eyes locked on the glowing star ahead. Behind them, the hunters closed in, 3 dark ships cutting through space like blades. The chase had ended. The final fight had begun. Beside him, the alien woman sat upright, her silver eyes burning with light. She was weak, her body trembling, but her spirit shone brighter than ever. Every breath she took was heavy, every movement slow, yet her gaze was steady. She knew what awaited them at the star, and so did Elias and End. One way or another, the star grew larger. No ordinary sun, but a dying giant. Its light burned red, its surface boiling with storms of fire. Around it, hidden in the shadows of broken moons, Elias saw them sleeping ships, dozens, maybe hundreds. Ancient vessels resting silent, cloaked in dust and time. The woman pressed her hand to the glass, whispering one word, home. Elias's chest tightened. Her people frozen like she once was, waiting in silence. If they awoke, if their weapons returned, humanity's fragile colonies would not survive. The hunters moved closer, their weapons powering up. A voice cracked over the radio, sharp and cold. Human captain, surrender the woman, leave, and live. Elias laughed bitterly. Though fear burned inside him, he pressed the radio and growled, "You'll have to tear her from my hands." The woman's silver eyes flickered, a faint smile on her lips. She stood, moving to the center of the ship, her hands glowing faint blue. Elias rose quickly, fear in his voice. "Stop, you'll burn yourself out." But she only shook her head, whispering, "No." Together, her hands reached toward him. Hesitant, Elias placed his hands in hers. In that moment, warmth flooded his body, light surging from her skin into his. The ship around them hummed, alive in ways Elias had never felt. The lantern systems lit like fire, old circuits sparking with sudden power. Engines roared stronger. Shields flared brighter. Weapons that had never worked came alive. Elias gasped, his heart pounding, as if he had become part of the ship itself. The woman's power had joined with his human will, weaving something new. The hunters fired, beams of deadly light striking, but the lantern held, its shields bending the blasts away. Elias gritted his teeth, pulling the controls. The old ship moved like a predator. "Faster, sharper, alive," he shouted. "If they want war, we'll give them war." The woman's silver eyes glowed brighter, her voice rising in ancient chants. Together they guided the ship, dodging fire, striking back with weapons no one believed it had. The first hunter ship cracked, fire spilling into the void, but the others pressed closer, relentless. Elias's arms shook with strain, sweat dripping from his brow. The woman staggered. Her light flickering, he held her tighter, shouting, "Stay with me, don't you dare quit." The hunters unleashed their full fury. Blasts hammering the lantern, metal groaned, alarms screamed, sparks rained from the ceiling. The ship shuddered on the edge of breaking, but Elias roared into the storm, refusing to fall. In that moment, he understood. Her people had been betrayed because no one stood beside them. She had been frozen because no one chose to fight for her. But he was human, and humans did not give up, not when trust was given. With the last of her strength, the woman raised her hands. Her silver eyes blazed like twin stars. Elias shouted in defiance, his voice joining hers. Together, they unleashed a wave of light. The space around them bent, energy tearing through the hunters. The second ship shattered. The third twisted in flame. Silence followed, broken only by the hum of their own vessel. The hunters were gone, destroyed in the storm of their unity. The lantern drifted, battered but alive. Elias collapsed into his chair. Gasping for breath, the woman fell into his arms, her body trembling, her eyes dimming. He held her close, whispering, "You're safe now." "We're safe." Her lips curved in the faintest smile, She whispered weakly, "Human. Different." Then her eyes closed, her body sinking into rest. But her chest still rose and fell alive. Not lost. Elias looked at the star ahead. The ancient fleet still sleeping. He knew the war was not over. Her people remained. Her enemies remained. The danger was far from gone. But something had changed forever. One human, one choice, had turned the tide. He had spent his last credits on a frozen stranger. He had trusted when others would have feared. And in doing so, he had proven what it meant to be human. The lantern drifted onward, carrying them both, the future uncertain, the path dangerous. But Elias no longer feared, because trust, once born, could not be broken. And in the cold silence of space, a forgotten war had found its first hope.